Hello and welcome to Unboxed, the SRF podcast. I'm your host, Nick Bussey, Multimedia Manager here at SRF Consulting Group, and today we're going to talk about Sacred Water Shared Future, a campaign celebrating 100 years of cleanup and restoration of the Mississippi River in the Twin Cities. We're going to talk about how the river was so polluted in 1926 that a survey that year found only 3 living fish in the 42 miles between Minneapolis and Red Wing. And we're going to talk about the decades of engineering and public policy that turned the river around. It's a fascinating story that not many people know, so stay tuned. Well, welcome. Thank you both for being here. I am so excited to have this conversation. I've been waiting for this for a long time. We get to tell a story today that I think is a really great story that is essential to the history of the Twin Cities and the Mississippi River, and it's one that not a lot of people know about. So I guess first I want to just ask you to just introduce yourselves, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do and your role in the campaign.
Great. Thanks for having us, Nick. My name is Cassie Champion, and I work for the Metropolitan Council doing water quality monitoring work. So that's been spent my entire career there. I've worked there for 27 years, but I work out of Metro Water Resource Recovery Facility, which is the largest and oldest wastewater treatment plant on the Mississippi River. So even though my academic background is a lot more ecology and water resources focused, my work life has been entirely centered around this big water infrastructure.
Great.
I'm Abby Moore. I'm the Outreach Program Manager at the Mississippi Watershed Management Organization, and I've been there for almost 10 years. I work with the public to help them understand how we impact water quality on the Mississippi River, both positively and negatively. So our organization is focused on protecting and improving water quality in the Mississippi River and the surrounding watershed. And I've been involved with this campaign since 2021, so quite a while. And I am on the leadership team and the steering committee.
Great. Well, thank you both for being here. I should start this episode with just a little bit of disclosure. So we're here to talk about Sacred Water Shared Future, which is a campaign commemorating 100 years of cleanup and restoration of the Mississippi River. And we're going to get into the whole story behind that. I should mention that Sacred Water Shared Future is a client of SRF via Mississippi Park Connection, which is the fiscal agent for the campaign. However, you're not compensating us in any way for being here. We invited you in to have a friendly conversation about what we think is a really important issue. So thank you again for being here. And I want to start with what happened 100 years ago. And so I want to just paint a picture of if somebody had gone down to the Mississippi River in 1926, and I'm thinking about one of my favorite parts of Minneapolis is the Mississippi River Gorge. If you walk down that big staircase from 34th Street along West River Parkway, you go down into that area, like right along the what's Longfellow Beach now. If somebody went down there in 1926, what would they have found? What did the river look like then?
Yeah, that's such a good question, Nick, and such a good observation that it's so beautiful now. And in 1926, it was not so beautiful. It was a severely polluted river that was described as hazardous for contact, for people, or for wildlife. So it was really an ecological disaster, but not subtle. It would have been very obviously severely polluted. You would have been able to smell it. You would have been able to see it, and you would not have wanted to be anywhere near that beach. And there's really a lot of descriptive documentation. So the 1926 study, I'll talk more about. It was the first water quality survey on the main stem channel through the Mississippi River. But the pollution, it took decades to get to that level of severity and then persisted for a while beyond because they had to figure out what to do about it, right? So I'm going to read some descriptive documentation from the Metropolitan Drainage Commission from 1933. And the reason I want to read this is a quote that I'm going to share from scientists and engineers who are doing their best to use like really objective language. That's their job. Their job is to describe what they see. And this is what they saw. The gases were bringing to the surface numerous sludge masses. This exceedingly foul condition, accompanied by the appearance of sleek and scum over large areas of water surface. So that's the the scientist and engineer's description, but if you can pull up the video that we've got from 1933, like
Yes.
showing us the conditions, showing us the sludge masses, showing us the methane gas bubbles. I'm going to read a little excerpt of a travel memoir that was written about a river trip in 1933. So the author is Clarence Jonk, and his memoir that he wrote is called River Journey. And he put his houseboat in the river in Minneapolis, kind of near the Washington Avenue Bridge in October of 1933. And his intention was that he was going to navigate the whole river all the way to New Orleans. And he actually only made it to Winona, which is only about 100 miles and still, in Minnesota. But still, he left us this just incredibly vivid description of what he saw. So I'm just going to read part of that for you. The houseboat has been lowered into the sewage-laden water where fish die, bloat, and turn idly about in the eddies, showing their worm-infested bodies like a curse to the men who infected their world. Continuously, their white mouths nudge the manure of humanity, the offwash of the streets and gutters, and here, curling under our starboard side, a brown foam bubbles and steams. Such is our baptism into the great river.
And I should mention, so for the people who are just listening, we're watching a kind of reel of footage. And I guess we should specify, I think this is from the 1930s.
1933,
correct?
yep. Summer 1933.
So it's a few years after the time period we're talking about. But it is a thankfully unrecognizable to anyone who has been down to the river today. It is some pretty harrowing footage of some sludge. And I don't even know how to describe this, but it is, I mean, the river is just in horrible shape. So let's talk a little bit about how the river got to this point. Can you tell us a little bit about the history?
Yeah, that's great. I like to, I'm not a historian, okay, right? I already said that. So I like to tell the story in sort of 3 simple steps, which obviously leaves out a lot of really cool and interesting material. But so I'll just quickly go over regional population growth, the development of sewers, and then commerce as well. Those are kind of the 3 main elements that I like to talk about. But before I do that, where our campaign is especially looking at the century from 1926 to 2026. Time didn't start in 1926, right? There have been people living on the Mississippi River for thousands of years. And 1 century in the life of the 11,000-year-old Mississippi River, it just isn't very long. But it's a really important story to highlight. And so that's why we centered the campaign around this 100-year period. But what really changed was in the 1860s, population regionally really started to grow. So previous to that, it was primarily native tribes that lived here at the time, and their lifestyle was really harmonious with the river. So it's really the influx of population starting in like 1860 or so, and the really remarkable growth rate that was unlike anything that the Mississippi River had ever experienced in its ecologic history. So the population in 1860 was about 3,000 in Minneapolis. Now I'm only talking about Minneapolis. It's not the only city that's growing. St. Paul is growing. Other regional hubs are growing. But in Minneapolis in 1860, there were about 3,000 residents. And by 1890, there were 165,000 residents. And so that's only Minneapolis. And that growth rate is so extraordinary that if like the population had kept growing at that rate, there would be more than 500 million people in Minneapolis right now,
Wow.
which is, the whole population of the country is only something like 340 million. So
Right.
it was just ecologically unprecedented growth. And people are people. They're always going to do the thing that they're always going to do every day. And I work at the wastewater treatment plant, so we just talk about poop all the time. But that's what I'm going to talk about right now. Everybody, but they didn't have plumbing. They didn't have anything. It was just in their backyards. The city literally became a cesspool. And there's a really interesting 1877 editorial from the Minneapolis Tribune. The title of it is Invitation to Death. Like the writers of the editorial really understood that this was a massive public health crisis, and the solution was sewers. And that's what they called for. The city needs sewers. And so by 1900, over 120 miles of sewer were built in the Twin Cities, but these sewers took the sewage directly to the Mississippi River. So they've really kind of mitigated the problem of direct human contact, direct human exposure to raw sewage. It's underground, it's in a pipe, but it's going straight out to the Mississippi River. And we do have a really great 1927 photo of the Lake Street sewer disgorging its contents into the Mississippi River. It's pretty gross. The sewage is flowing directly into the river, but there's a reliable spring flood every year. So the majority of the problem really is washed away, washed downstream. Okay, so now those were the first two elements of my story. Remember, I had three parts. First was population growth. Second was sewers. Third is commerce. Okay, the growing cities needed a way to get goods into and out of the Twin Cities, and the Mississippi River corridor, like that's still a really important transportation corridor.
Yeah.
Because of the development of the lock and dam system. So the Ford Dam, lock and dam number 1, was built in 1917, and that held back the water, and then it also held back the sewage. Okay, so now what had been a free-flowing river is now a series of still, stepped pools holding the sewage in place, which is really kind of, that's my 3-part story of really the death of the Mississippi River. Mm-hmm. So bringing us to 1926, which was the first study of the Mississippi River channel through the Twin Cities from about St. Paul to Hastings. And in that study, they collected fish at points along the way and only were able to collect 3 live fish. And one of them was described as very sluggish.
I can imagine. So let's talk about Sacred Water Shared Future. Talk about the origins of this. How did you come up with the idea? This was your idea to do this celebration of 100 years of cleaning up the river, right?
Yeah.
What inspired you to do that?
Well, so like I said, I've spent my career at Metro Water Resource Recovery Facility. So this that 1926 study is really the origin point of the monitoring programs that I've built my entire career in. And so it's always been a part of how I think about the Mississippi River. But I learned over time that it's really a bit of lost history. It's commonly when I would ask people, is the Mississippi River cleaner now than it was 100 years ago? Typically the answer is that the river is the dirtiest now that it's ever been. And that's not true. We just looked at literal video evidence of how filthy the river was in the 30s, the 20s, the teens. But around maybe 2016, I think having that 6 pasted to the end of the year, I started thinking, gosh, 2026 is coming and it's kind of this cool story that's lost. Somebody should do something. And so that's the first vague idea, the first vague version of the idea that came to me. And so then in 2019, I thought, okay, well, I need to try to capture some of this idea in writing. And so I wrote down a couple of versions of my idea. I shared it with management within Met Council. And, over the course of conversations over about a year, we really came to the conclusion that somebody should do something, right? Mm-hmm. But who was that somebody going to be? It couldn't possibly be just one organization. It would have to be a big regional partnership. And what was the thing? What was the something going to be? Well, the partnership was going to have to come up with what would that be? What would be a way to really bring the Mississippi River to the forefront of everyone's minds during the course of 2026? So early in 2020, I went out to start to try to find partners, and that's what became the planning group and other important contributors. That's the somebody, and the something that we're doing is Sacred Water Shared Future, and that's how we got here.
And Abby, how did you get involved?
Well, Cassie had started working with a former park ranger from the National Park Service here, the MNRA. And so he actually approached me and asked me if I was willing to be part of this planning group. And I remember in 2021 when he approached me thinking like 2026, that's so far away. Sure. And here we are. So that's how I originally got involved. I mean, my work through the Mississippi Watershed Management Organization is very focused on helping people understand this connection that we have with the river, all of the things that we get from it, why it's such an important part of our region. And so this felt like a really natural thing for us to be involved with, because it's really already a lot of the work that we do, and the ability to really magnify it to be a region-wide recognition and honoring of the progress that we've made and the work that still needs to be done just felt like right up our alley. So I
Right.
joined.
Where did the name come from? Sacred Water, Shared Future.
That's a great question, because we definitely did not come up with that on our own. There were many steps behind that.
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about that. So the planning group, the leadership team, talked a lot about sort of how to create this unified identity, how to capture the essence of this honoring of the river, this recognition of the fact that this is a 100-year snippet in time, the fact that so many people have been connected with the river, have impacted the river, have worked hard to clean it up. And to really kind of capture all of that, we ended up hiring a creative firm as a consultant to help us put together this logo and the name and the branding for the campaign in general. And so they worked with community, they worked with us as a leadership team and a steering committee. They did lots of interviews of different folks from around the Twin Cities Metro, and also hired a subcontractor who is a Native American artist to really help us try to capture as much of the feeling and the sense of place and the sense of responsibility for this place that all sorts of different cultures and people from around the Twin Cities would identify with. We really wanted this to be an inclusive and broad-ranging campaign. And so ultimately, through lots of hard work and lots of iterations, we landed on Sacred Water, Shared Future and the branding that you'll see on our website.
What are we asking people to do as part of this campaign?
Well, we are asking partners across the Twin Cities Metro to hold events that are somehow connected to the Mississippi River. So they can be storytelling events, they can be bird watching, they can be historical presentations, they can be recreation events, anything that helps folks connect with the river and then hopefully start to develop that sense of curiosity and care. Also understanding more about the history, or even just like right now, what's going on, what kinds of things that we do every day, or ways that our city is built. What are the things that impact the river negatively, and what can we be part of that ultimately helps protect the river? What we hope is that by participating in these events, people will be inspired and motivated to help solve the problems of the river in the future. We know we've made a huge amount of progress, and that's proof that we can make progress as far as water quality and ecological health for the Mississippi River and the whole basin. And so with that understanding that we can really make a positive difference, we'd like people to feel really excited to be participants in future improvements. And so by asking partners to hold events, they can just be their own events. And we have a website which ultimately serves as a hub for all of these events. And so folks can submit their, organizations can submit their events to us. And as long as they align with our priorities, they'll go on our website. And then our website is sacredwatersharedfuture.org. So folks can visit that and they can look for events that are going on. So in addition to asking partners to hold events that are part of this campaign, we're asking the public to participate. And so look for lots and lots of opportunities to learn more about the river, recreate on the river, do good things for the river. There already have been several events, and it's just the beginning of the year. And we anticipate that there will be a lot more through the course of the year.
That's great. And you're also asking people to share their stories of the river, right? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Thanks for reminding me about that. Yeah, that's a big part actually of this campaign. So in partnership with the Minnesota Story Collective, and also as other organizations are collecting stories, we really want to gather stories about people's experiences with the river, the way they feel about it, what it means to them. And so there is a portal on our website that people can connect to the Minnesota Story Collective through and share their stories about the river. That will be a fantastic gathering space and a really good way for us and all Minnesotans to really understand what the river means to us kind of as a whole, because different people are going to have different experiences with it. It's going to have different levels of meaning. And so we would love to see that collection. And I think really just practicing the art of storytelling is a big part of this campaign, because it helps us think too about our own connections and about our own experiences, and how that relates. Because even though we all have different stories, there are going to be common themes in a lot of them.
Well, we've talked a lot about the state that the river was in 1926. So public opinion starts to galvanize around doing something about this, especially after the lock and dam is built and all the sewage is now trapped in one place, basically. What was the first big turning point in terms of cleaning up the river? What was the first big policy or infrastructure that was built to change that? Can you talk about that?
So it really was the response to that 1926 study being the first kind of full channel study of the Mississippi River. And the conclusion was that they should build a facility to collect and treat the waste and then put the clean water back in the river. And then that facility should be located as far downstream from the populated areas as possible. And so that's what Metro Water Resources Recovery Facility is. At the time, it was called Pig's Eye Sewage Plant. So that was the first wastewater treatment plant on the Mississippi River. So it's the oldest, and it's still the biggest on the Mississippi River. It's about the 8th largest in the country. At the time, it was the largest. And they called it the largest chemical treatment plant, which meant they were disinfecting as the last stage of treatment. So that started the Metro started operating in 1938. And there's documentation that says that the sludge mats cleared up within 4 months of beginning to collect and treat the wastewater. So I think it's such an important story about how people could work together to solve a really complicated and really difficult water quality problem.
And it's the same plant today. And I mean, I imagine it's evolved a lot in technology.
It's a lot bigger.
But so it's been operating continuously since it was built, right?
Yes.
What were some of the remaining challenges, and how did they start addressing those?
Yeah, the two different terms that we use when we're describing that pollution is called point source pollution and non-point source pollution. So point source pollution is what's coming out of a factory or some other kind of industrial process. Non-point source pollution is more general across the landscape. So imagine like a rainstorm or our current melt event washing that dirt and salt off the streets into our waterways. That we'd call that an example of non-point source pollution. So yeah, those both point source pollution and non-point source pollution is an ongoing challenge. And really, like in the broad scope of history, point source pollution is what got the attention first because it was kind of easier to point at,
Right.
Point source pollution. You can point at that pipe and the pollution is coming out of it and you can do something about it because it's kind of this contained thing that you can see. And kind of addressing non-point source pollution. Both of them continue to be a challenge, but particularly non-point source pollution is an ongoing challenge.
Let's talk a bit about the river now. Who's involved in managing the river today, and talk about the partners for Sacred Water Shared Future.
Well, there's a lot of different organizations who are ultimately in charge of managing the river today, from lots of different angles, because one of the things that we've recognized is that there's a lot of different ways that the river needs to be managed in order to be healthy. And it's hard for one organization to have enough capacity to do it all. So we've got Met Council, who is really managing the wastewater treatment and the quality of the water going back into the river. We've got watershed management organizations and watershed districts who are working really hard to manage that non-point source pollution. So trying to help folks recognize all those little tiny bits of impact that accumulate once they all end up in the river or other local waterways. And then we've got the federal government, we've got the National Park Service, we've got the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, we've got the Department of Natural Resources. That is not an exhaustive list. The Army Corps of Engineers obviously still has a really significant part of managing the river. But as far as the campaign, the leadership of the Sacred Water Shared Future campaign is a group of people representing different organizations. We've got Met Council, who is the leader of all of this, Capital Region Watershed District, One Mississippi, Freshwater, Mississippi Park Connection, the Mississippi Watershed Management Organization, and the National Park Service make up the leadership team. And then we've also got a steering committee that is a larger group of partners. They are all listed on our website. I don't want to name them because I'm afraid I'm going to forget somebody, and they're all very important.
Yeah.
But there are so many different organizations whose work comes together to help us try to continue to improve and protect the river from all sorts of possible assaults, from climate change to more runoff and non-point source pollution, wastewater, all sorts of things. And so it really is a massive effort to keep the river clean and healthy.
Well, yeah. So let's talk a little bit about the next 100 years, because that's part of the goal of the campaign, is to tell the story of this success of cleaning up the river in order to inspire the next 100 years, because there are challenges now facing the river, right?
Yeah.
So like, what are the main pollutants in the Mississippi River today that are of concern to human beings, I guess?
Mm-hmm. I can talk about the ones that we really focus on in the core of the urban area. So phosphorus is a really significant pollutant, and the main source of phosphorus in the Mississippi River in our area right now is actually landscaping waste. So grass clippings, leaves, sticks. It all seems so like it doesn't make sense when you think about it, because you're like, that stuff's just natural. How can that be bad? But when it accumulates all in one place, which is the Mississippi River in our area, and then starts to break down, it releases that phosphorus, and the phosphorus acts as a fertilizer in the river and creates plant overgrowth, which we see as algae blooms. And that really just changes the chemistry of the water, which makes it less habitable for wildlife and other plants, and less clean for us. So that's a really significant one. Bacteria is significant, nitrogen, heavy metals, and what am I forgetting? Salt. Chlorides from road salt is huge, especially at this time of year. And, I think in this kind of new era of warming climate, we're seeing a lot more salt being used because we're experiencing freeze thaw much more often than we did, certainly during my childhood. And that creates a lot more ice, which then creates more need for the only thing that we know that actually removes ice from surfaces, which is chlorides. So those are all significant sources of pollution that we really focus on trying to mitigate as much as possible.
I know sediment is another one, right?
Oh, yeah,
so
sediment.
We have an issue with that.
Absolutely. One other thing I wanted to mention about pollutants, particularly these non-point source pollutants that the MWMO focuses on. There are pollutants that we don't know a ton about yet as far as what the impacts of them are. And that's, I think, a lot of the work for the future. And one of the big ones that's coming to mind is microplastics. So from having plastic on the surface that water is running over and carrying into our waterways, that plastic does break down mostly into smaller and smaller pieces. And so we know that there are microplastics suspended all throughout our waterways, and we don't yet have a really clear understanding of what the impacts of that are on river health, on ecological health. But I think most of us are pretty confident that the impacts aren't good, and that that's something that we need to be aware of. So that's something to keep in mind for the future.
Yeah, it seems like we've almost sort of already picked the low-hanging fruit. And from here on out, especially with these emerging contaminants, it's only going to get more difficult. I mean, it's an open question, right? Whether you can even remove some of this stuff. Chloride is another one. Like
chloride.
Once it's in there, it's there.
Yeah. And there's all sorts of things from the wastewater treatment process that also we're still not sure how to remove. And so this is an example, I think, that this campaign is really trying to embrace. Like there are still problems. There are still things that we are just starting to kind of wrap our heads around and we don't yet know how to solve. But I think the success and the amount that we've been able to improve water quality in the Mississippi River and even just the ecological health of the corridor in general through efforts that were particularly kicked off with this study in 1926 really helped prove to us that with some effort and coordination among different levels of government and different kinds of organizations and people. So like everyday people are involved in this too, because not only are they supporting policy changes, but they're actually actively participating in things that impact water quality in a positive way. And so I think we really want people to recognize that even though there's still problems and we don't know how to solve them, that we can get there. But we need to work together and we need to be committed to it. So that's a lot of our hopes for how people will engage in this campaign and the kinds of things that they'll take away.
Yeah, I think really underpinning the campaign is our desire for people to come to the Mississippi River and learn its story and care about it.
Mm-hmm.
That underpins everything. Some of these science and technology or public policy topics can get a little complex and a little esoteric, but at the root of it is that our region and everyone in it is critically dependent on the Mississippi River. We wouldn't be here if the Mississippi River wasn't here.
Yeah.
So we should mention, so the funding for Sacred Water Shared Future came from a grant from the Mississippi Watershed Management Organization. But there is also a fun little side story that I think we wanted to tell, which I think is going to be surprising to a lot of people, which is that the original seed money for the campaign, or that was used for the campaign, came from the band Semisonic. Does somebody want to take a crack at telling that story and how that came about?
Go for
Sure,
it, Cassie.
yeah, I think it's a pretty fun story. It's a super surprise to me because it's not the kind of thing that it's not a goal that you can set for yourself and then strive towards. This came out of the blue. Nick, you actually called me up from your former role with Mississippi Water Management Organization.
I should do another bit of disclosure. So I was involved in this campaign on the front end a few years ago in my previous role at the Mississippi Watershed Management Organization. I worked with Abby for many years. And so I was involved in some of the initial sort of communications planning. And so that's how I got into this story. All right. Okay. I'll let you continue.
So you called me and said that your manager had come to you with some money from the band Semisonic, which we all know, and they had auctioned off a drum and wanted to donate the proceeds to something related to the river, and through a personal connection called your district administrator and said, "Hey, do you have any ideas?" And
I'm trying to pull up the image. Yeah. So my former boss, Kevin Reich, executive director of the MWMO, Kevin knows a lot of people. He's just a guy who knows a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
Used to be a Minneapolis City Council member. And he knew the band. Somehow he knew the band, Semisonic. And so let me see if I can pull up this image. Sorry, give me 1 second here. Where'd it go? For those who are listening, I just pulled up an image from Instagram. This is from the band's Instagram page. And it's a really cool poster of a pair of river otters that was done for a concert they did in 2024 at the Palace Theater. I'll give a shout out to the artist. His name is Ryan Seitz. I might be pronouncing that wrong, but just wanted to give recognition there. But so they had painted this, or a version of this, on a bass drum, and they auctioned off the bass drum. And they apparently the band is really like they're really into the river. Like they're big fans of it. They want to conserve the river, and so they wanted to give it the money from this auction for this drum to something river related. And so I said, well, I know something that's going on that's river related. And so that's the long and short of it. But I just think that is the most unique possible way to fund a
that was
nonprofit
our first
and government
money,
campaign.
and that was the
So-
first step towards the funds that we used to have a contract with the local design firm that came up with the name, brand, logo, and theme, Sacred Water Shared Future. So that was.
And so this is another reason that it's important for people to appreciate the river, right? Because you might take your kids to an event on the river this year, and they really get into it. Maybe they paddle the river or something, and then 20 years later they're in a band and they auction off a bass drum, and that money can go towards something productive. So, what do we want people to do? Sacred Water Shared Future has a website. People can go there. They can look at, there's a large amount of events already, and there's more coming on a weekly basis. People are registering their events. There's a lot of, should we talk a little bit about like the variety of events? Because it's kind of a little bit of everything, right? I mean, there's art
I think it'd be
things
nice to highlight some of our really significant partner events that we know are coming. So one that just concluded was an art shanty, which was pretty cool, but art shanties is finished for the year, and ice is going away pretty fast now too. But also coming up through the course of the year, Three Rivers Park District is hosting, or is calling 2026 their big year of rivers. So they're having river-related events that focus on the Minnesota, Mississippi, and Crow rivers. Pollution Control Agency has the Eco Experience at the State Fair, and this year that will be Mississippi River focused, and there will be a heavy presence of Sacred Water Shared Future at the Eco Building at the State Fair, which will be super fun thing to be a part of. And there's another traveling exhibit that's part of both Pollution Control Agency and Minnesota Center for Humanities. The exhibit is called We Are Water MN, and it's a statewide traveling exhibit that's been around for many years, and it's been all over the state of Minnesota. But this year specifically, it's focusing its locations on Mississippi River communities. So there's other efforts to connect with libraries, nature centers. There's a big variety of partners who are hosting organizations. So that's one of the actions that we'd love to have organizations take, is if you're hosting an event that you're already planning, or you have some ideas for events that will really center the Mississippi River, that you would include that in our Sacred Water Shared Future calendar as a way of broadening the scope that you can reach as well, and as a way of adding to the campaign and the campaign impact. And if you are someone who's interested in participating in events, our calendar can show you when things are happening. You can look for things that are close to you, or maybe a part of the metro that you've never been to before. There's a lot of variety represented on our calendar. And I think that I want to mention the Minnesota Story Collective storytelling opportunity again, because that's something that you can do without leaving your home, and that anyone can do. We've got a link on our website that will take you away from sacredwatersharedfuture.org to the Minnesota Story Collective. And they collect your stories. And those stories are create a continually renewing stream of qualitative data that is shared with state lawmakers and other organizations as they get requested. So these stories will have a long life and be used kind of in ways that I think we can't even quite imagine right now. But the stories are building up a set of qualitative data that will be really unlike anything else. So that's a great opportunity that I hope everyone, whether you're thinking about your organization or thinking about yourself or your family, I hope you'll take a few minutes to explore that story collecting option.
That's great. This feels like a pretty good place to end. I don't know if either of you has any final thoughts. I wanted to say, I'm really happy to be a part of this. SRF is happy to be a part of this in our small way. And I just think it is such an important thing to tell people that, no matter how big a problem is, like, you can solve it. Like, if we work together, we can solve it. Sometimes it takes a long time, takes passing laws, and takes a lot of hard work. But I just feel like, especially now more than ever, people could maybe use a little uplifting story of how, no matter how bad things get, we can solve problems. And so I just really appreciate you letting us be a part of this and tell this story, and encourage everybody to go to sacredwatersharedfuture.org and check out all those great events, and tell your Mississippi River story. And do you have any final thoughts? Or
Yeah, I'd say just thanks for having us. I think this is a great opportunity to share our story, which is such an important part of our region. But I think one of the elements that we need to keep in mind is that we are a really big metropolitan area, and we are on one of the most famous rivers in the world. I think our story is just a really broadly important one to understand how a really dense population of people can find a way to live in harmony with the river that we absolutely depend on.
that's great. All right. Well, thank you so much for being here. This has been a lot of fun.
Thank you.
It's good to see you both.
Yeah, you too.
And
Thanks, Nick.
we'll leave it there. So thank you, everyone, for watching and listening. And don't forget to subscribe to our podcast. Check out sacredwatersharedfuture.org. We will put a link to any resources we talked about during the podcast in the description. So check that out. And we'll see you next time.